So in the last episode, I asked the question of why the Kremlings were moving towards DK's house after the bananas were gone, and, being crocodiles, why they'd even want bananas in the first place. I also said this level had the answers. That was a lie, but not entirely. It's hard to explain, but stick with me and it'll start to make a bit more sense, I promise. Ropey Rampage is an amazing example of how developers in the 16-bit era managed to do a lot with a little. It takes the tile set from the previous level, adds new lighting and weather effects, a new roster of enemies, and focuses around one central mechanic to create a distinct, memorable visual identity, as well as furthering the story and world building. Before we go into that though, let's take a look at the theme of the level. Ropey Rampage is centered around the mechanic of climbing and swinging on ropes. It's right there in the name. Right there. From a game design perspective, it's kinda genius. It's such an integral and common part of the gameplay that dedicating a level to the mechanic sets the player up for the rest of the game. By the time the level's over, even the worst players got the muscle memory down. It might seem a bit excessive to devote an entire level to such a simple mechanic, but there are a couple of reasons why it works. First, the previous level throws so much at the player already that any more might be a bit overwhelming. Not difficult necessarily, but overwhelming, sure. Which leads to my next point. Drip feeding players various aspects of a game is one of the best ways to keep them playing. It keeps things novel and stops the game from getting stale and repetitive. Ropey Rampage adds a few more things like the TNT barrels and ramps up the difficulty a little bit. Armies and zingers show up for the first time, both being harder than the average enemy. The introduction of Army at the start of the level also works to highlight the gameplay differences between Donkey and Diddy. Diddy needs to jump on Army twice to defeat him, while one is enough for Donkey. But if Diddy's holding the TNT barrel, the Army will roll right into it, so he's got the advantage there. It's a little thing, but it just helps to highlight the differences between the two Kongs. The level's also much more liberal with its pitfalls than the first, meaning new players have to be a bit more careful in the platforming sections. It's not all bad though. Ropey Rampage introduces a concept I like to call happy accidents. Both bonus areas require falling off platforms into unseen or barely visible blast barrels. This kind of thing shows up a few more times throughout the game, and if you're the sort of player who wants to find all the bonus areas, it plants a seed in your head that sometimes you're gonna have to take a leap of faith. But what does that have to do with the questions brought up at the start of the video? Nothing at all. I just thought it was cool. In fact, Ropey Rampage doesn't quite answer the questions completely, but it does provide some clues as to what the answers could be. Mostly in the weather effects. Hear me out. It's pouring rain for most of the level. It was pouring rain the night before too. It says so in the instruction manual. Remember those? When I was a kid, I drew all over mine and it's one of my biggest regrets. Anyway, that's 2 nights of heavy rain in a row. What does this tell us? Well, being a jungle on a tropical island, the seasons are probably split into wet and dry. While the weather's more or less fine during the day, 2 consecutive nights of huge storms is a pretty good indication that monsoon season is starting. While the Kongs may seem lighthearted and easygoing, their lives are probably a lot harder than they seem. This by itself doesn't tell us what the Kremlings want with the banana horde, but it's the first major clue we get. To get to the bottom of the Kremlings' motivation, I think there are 2 more things we need to ask. Why does DK need so many bananas? And why are the Kongs willing to risk moving through the jungle in the middle of the night during a tropical storm to get them back? I think there's a real good reason for the urgency, but we'll get into that later on. The storm clears up, ending the first day of the Kongs' adventure. Those first 2 levels are such an awesome 1-2 combo, complementing each other and setting up the rest of the game to come. That was part 2 of Overthinking Donkey Kong Country. If you liked what you saw and you want to see more, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you later.